The night air was crisp as James pulled his worn-out jacket tighter around his body. The city skyline shimmered above him, a stark contrast to the life he lived below its glittering towers. He let out a quiet sigh, glancing down at the small hand clutching his own. His daughter Lily looked up at him with bright, curious eyes. "Are we really going to your work, Daddy?" she asked, her voice filled with excitement. James forced a smile and nodded. "Yeah, sweetheart. It's just for tonight, no babysitter, remember?" Lily beamed. "I get to see where you work." James felt a pang in his chest. If only she knew. The towering building they were about to enter wasn't some magical place. It was a place where he scrubbed floors, emptied trash bins, and remained invisible to the people who worked there. A cleaner. That was all he was. Still, Lily's excitement was contagious. As they reached the grand revolving doors, James took a deep breath and pushed them open. The bright polished lobby stretched before them, a stark contrast to the world they had just stepped from. The marble floors reflected the golden chandeliers overhead, and the smell of fresh coffee and expensive perfume lingered in the air. Lily's eyes widened. "Wow, your work is fancy." James chuckled softly. "Yeah, it is." He led her toward the janitor's supply room, keeping his head down as employees in sleek suits strode past without so much as a glance in his direction. That was how it always was. He was just part of the background, someone who only existed when the floors weren't spotless enough. "Stay here, okay?" James said as he knelt to Lily's eye level. "I'll be quick. Just sit and be quiet." Lily pouted. "But I want to see what you do." James hesitated. He didn't want her to see him like this, to see the way people ignored him, the way he worked until his fingers were raw. But she was here now, and he couldn't just lock her in a closet. "Okay," he finally said, sighing. "Just stay close." Lily grinned, taking his hand again. They moved quietly through the hallways as James began his usual routine. He wiped down surfaces, changed trash bags, and did his best to blend into the walls like he always did. Lily watched everything with fascination, as if cleaning an office was some kind of grand adventure. Then, just as James was about to finish up, a voice echoed down the hall, a deep, commanding voice. "Lily!" James froze. Lily's grip on his hand tightened. Then, before he could stop her, she turned toward the source of the voice and screamed, "Daddy!" James's heart nearly stopped. He turned, his breath catching in his throat, as his daughter bolted toward a tall, imposing man in an expensive suit. A man who stared at her with an expression of shock, confusion, and something else. Recognition. James's pulse thundered in his ears as the CEO of the company, one of the most powerful men in the city, locked eyes with him, and in that moment, James knew. His entire world was about to change. James felt the blood drain from his face as he stared at the CEO. The man's expression shifted from shock to something unreadable, his sharp eyes darting between James and Lily. For a moment, the entire world seemed to freeze. Lily, unaware of the tension thickening, the air, ran straight to the man and wrapped her little arms around his leg. "Daddy," she said again, her voice filled with excitement. "I found you." James' breath hitched. His entire body went rigid. This had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding. He took a shaky step forward, reaching out. "Lily, sweetheart." But the CEO lowered his gaze to the little girl clinging to him. His expression was unreadable, but there was something behind his eyes, something deep, something unsettling. He slowly knelt down, carefully placing his hands on Lily's shoulders. "What did you just call me?" His voice was quieter now, softer, but it held an edge. Lily grinned up at him, her innocent eyes sparkling. "Daddy, I knew I'd find you someday." James's stomach twisted painfully. He could feel his heart hammering against his ribs, his palms growing damp with sweat. He didn't understand what was happening. Why was Lily calling him that? And why did this powerful, untouchable man look so shaken? James swallowed hard and forced his feet to move. He crouched beside Lily and gently took her hands. "Lily, sweetheart, this isn't..." His voice came out hoarse. He cleared his throat and tried again. "This isn't your—" The CEO stood, up suddenly, towering over them both. His expression had darkened, his jaw tight. "Who are you?" His voice wasn't loud, but there was weight to it, authority. James hesitated before straightening. I work here." His voice was stiff, uncertain. He quickly added, "I'm a cleaner." The man's piercing gaze didn't waver. "And? Her—" James instinctively tightened his grip on Lily's hand. "She's my daughter." For a long, excruciating moment, no one spoke. Then the CEO exhaled sharply and ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. He turned his gaze to Lily again, his expression softer but still wary. "What's your name, kid?" Lily beamed up at him. "Lily James Carter," she announced, proudly. James's breath caught. A flicker of something flashed across the CEO's face. His expression hardened even more, but there was something beneath it. Something James couldn't decipher. "Carter," the CEO repeated slowly, his voice almost distant. James felt the air in the room shift. Something was wrong. Something was deeply wrong. The way this man, the most powerful man in the building, was looking at Lily. The way his entire body had gone rigid at her name. The way his eyes flickered with something James couldn't place. It wasn't just surprise. It was recognition. James's throat went dry. He forced himself to speak, keeping his voice steady. "Is something wrong?" The CEO didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slowly turned his gaze back to James, studying him like he was a puzzle he couldn't quite piece together. Then finally, he spoke. "Where's her mother?" James flinched. His jaw clenched, his fingers tightening around Lily's hand. He didn't want to talk about this. Not here. Not with him. "She passed away," James said quietly. Lily's grip on his hand softened. She glanced up at him, her smile fading a little. "It's okay, Daddy," she whispered, squeezing his fingers. James's heart ached. The CEO exhaled through his nose, something unreadable flickering across his face. Then, after another painfully long silence, he turned to Lily again. "And why do you think I'm your father?" Lily tilted her head, confused. "Because you are," she said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "I saw your picture." James's blood ran cold. His grip on her hand tightened. "What picture?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lily turned to him, her little face lighting up again. "The one in Mommy's old box. She kept a picture of him. I knew I'd find him one day." James felt his entire body go numb. His head snapped toward the CEO, but the man wasn't looking at him. His gaze was locked on Lily, his expression no longer unreadable, no longer composed. There was shock there, and beneath that, something far more dangerous. Something that sent a chill down James's spine. Because for the first time in his life, he realized that the man standing before him, the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the city, wasn't just looking at them as strangers. He was looking at them as something else. And James had a horrible feeling that whatever was happening right now was only the beginning. James felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. His thoughts raced, colliding into each other like a storm inside his head. Lily's words echoed in his mind, over and over again. She kept a picture of him. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. His grip on Lily's small hand tightened slightly, but she didn't seem to notice. She was still looking up at the CEO with innocent excitement, completely unaware of the weight of what she had just said. The CEO, this powerful, untouchable man, wasn't unaffected either. James could see it in his face. He wasn't just shocked. He wasn't just confused. He looked shaken. For a long, tense moment, no one said anything. Then the CEO exhaled, slow and measured, like he was trying to steady himself. His sharp gaze met James, and something in his eyes had changed. He wasn't just looking at James like a stranger anymore. He was looking at him like a threat. James's chest tightened. "I want to see that picture," the CEO finally said, his voice quiet but firm. James's gut twisted. His instincts screamed at him to grab Lily and walk away, to run. But how could he? Lily had just dropped a bomb that couldn't be ignored, and the way the CEO was looking at her now, like she was a puzzle piece he hadn't even known was missing, it sent a shiver down James's spine. I don't have it, James admitted, his voice stiff. The CEO's jaw tensed. Then where is it? James hesitated. His mind raced. That old box. Lily must have found it while going through her mother's things. But why hadn't he ever seen the picture? Had she hidden it? And why would she have a picture of him? It was in Mommy's things, Lily answered for him. I saw it last week, but it's old and kind of crinkly. The CEO's gaze darkened. Something shifted in the air. James could feel it. He didn't know much about this man, but he did know that people like him, powerful men who built empires, didn't take surprises lightly. And this was more than a surprise. It was personal. The CEO ran a hand down his face like he was trying to process everything. When he finally spoke, his voice was controlled, but there was an edge to it. Come with me. James stiffened. What? I need to talk to you. James's stomach twisted. Everything inside him screamed that this was a bad idea. That whatever was happening, it was bigger than him. Bigger than anything he had prepared for. And yet, as he looked down at Lily, who was still smiling like she had just reunited with family, his heart clenched. He had to know the truth. So after a long pause, he gave a small nod. The CEO turned on his heel, his movements sharp, controlled. James took a deep breath, then scooped Lily into his arms. She wrapped her arms around his neck, resting her head against his shoulder, completely unfazed by the tension crackling around them. James followed the CEO down the long, sleek hallways, past offices with glass walls, past people who barely spared them a glance. He felt out of place here, more than usual. Finally, they stopped in front of a massive door. The CEO pushed it open, revealing an expansive office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The view was breathtaking, but James barely noticed it. The door clicked shut behind them. The air was heavy. The CEO walked around his desk and leaned against it, arms crossed. He studied James for a long moment, then his gaze flickered to Lily. Put her down, he said, voice unreadable. James hesitated. I won't hurt her, the CEO added. James still didn't trust him, but he set Lily down gently, keeping one hand on her shoulder. The CEO exhaled and turned his gaze back to James. You need to tell me everything, he said, his voice quieter now. Who was her mother? James's chest tightened. He wasn't sure how much he should say. Would it even matter? His voice wavered. He cleared his throat. Her name was Emily. The CEO's entire body tensed. James noticed the shift immediately. The man was composed, but barely. There was something burning beneath his expression. Something James couldn't quite place. What else? The CEO asked. James swallowed hard. We met years ago. She passed away when Lily was 3. The CEO's jaw clenched. He looked away for a moment, staring out the window. His fingers curled slightly, like he was trying to steady himself. And then it hit James. The realization crashed over him like a tidal wave. The reaction. The way his expression shifted at Emily's name. The way he had looked at Lily. Like something inside him had clicked. No, it wasn't possible. James felt his stomach drop. Tell me the truth, the CEO said suddenly, his voice sharper now. Are you sure you're her father? James felt like he'd been punched in the gut. The air was sucked out of the room. Lily looked up at him, confused. Of course, he's my daddy, she said, her small voice breaking the heavy silence. He's always been. James's throat was dry. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to shut this conversation down and walk away. But something in the CEO's eyes stopped him, because deep down, James wasn't sure, and that terrified him.